You ever failed? You're looking at a failure in many ways at times. We've all had moments where things just don't go like we thought they should or that we hoped they would. Certain things go unaccomplished that we had hoped we could accomplish. Certain successes that seem out of our reach. And the temptation is to view ourselves as the failure rather than the moment. And the challenge sometimes is for us to continue to throw our bread upon the water when it seems like it never returns. It's hard sometimes to get up every day and face the challenges of the moment and of the day when it feels like that every time we try, it doesn't seem to work. And we want to throw up our hands in frustration and say, I quit. And that's a challenge all of us have to face from time to time. We all have a moment where we just want to quit. And that's the truth. And we can sit there this morning and say, I've never wanted to quit, and I don't think you're telling me the truth if you were to say that. I think all of us have had a moment with something in life where we just want to say, I'm done. I just won't do this any longer. But the writer of Ecclesiastes challenges us to continue to throw our bread upon the water despite the fact that it may not always have the success and the benefit and the results that we had hoped it would. We may not always get what we want or desire or what is even in our own minds right in certain circumstances. And again, we must fight the temptation of saying, I'm not going to do anything anymore because I don't seem to find the results that I was hoping for. The writer, I believe, challenges us, beginning in verse 1 of chapter 11 of the book of Ecclesiastes, that you cast our cares, or cast your bread, rather, upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. I want you to recognize that results of effort and labor and service are not always immediate. That he says that the results may be in many days. In other words, it may be a result that comes well after the fact. This particular phrase, I read a couple of different ideas about it. There are two basic schools of thought about this idea of casting your bread upon the waters. There are some who think it might reference the fact that there were some marshy lands that were kind of water laden a little bit, and they would sow rice into those lands, or they would sow other kinds of seed in hopes that though it was a marshy, wet kind of land, that it would still have produce of some kind. Others suggest that maybe this idea comes from the idea of the merchants who would produce their products of whatever it might be, would cart them up and package them together and hire some merchant vessel ship to take their cargo across into a distant land in order to hope that there might be somebody who buy their products on the other side. And I suppose in their day that it would have been a great act of faith in many ways. You're trusting the man in the vessel. You're trusting those who are going to receive those merchandise on the other side. There were no tracking numbers to determine whether or not that product ever reached its destination. And so with great faith, you stepped out on hopes that there would be reward to your work and success. But sometimes you need to cast your bread upon the waters, even when the result may be an unknown. Even when we may not know exactly what is going to be the outcome of this moment, what is going to be the end result of this activity, this action, this act of service, and we must offer it anyway. I think we're a very results-driven kind of society, and we kind of in our minds determine that nothing is worth the effort unless I can have some kind of immediate result to what it is that I'm doing. And the problem is that there's not much long-term thinking in the process. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, notice verse 58 of this text. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 58, he simply writes for us at the end of this context, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." I want you to notice something starkly different than how we would like this verse to read. In many senses, I think we would rather this verse say, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the results, always resounding in the benefit." That's not what he said. He said, always be busy in the work, and I'll bring the result in due time. You just be busy in the service. You keep acting. You keep casting your bread upon the water. You keep doing the things that I'm asking of you. Continue to do that which is right. And the reaping, the results may come well after the fact. And we have to remind ourselves sometimes on a daily basis to get up and do what's right just because it's the right thing to do. To get up every day and just say, I'm going to do what's right today, not because I may see some benefit from it, not because I may get rewarded for it, not because it may make me popular. I'm going to get up today and do what is right, even when the results are unknown. Even when I may not know whether this is going to be a good day or a bad day. Is this going to be a day where good things are respected, or is this going to be a day where good things are dishonored? I'm going to do what's right anyway. Even when I may not know what may be the outcome of that act. I want you to also notice something interesting about the text when he said, cast your bread upon the waters, plural. And cast your bread upon the waters. I believe each translation that I read had it as a plural in that text. And go back for a moment into Ecclesiastes 11. Let's add verse 2 into the conversation as well. Back into Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Notice verse 2, and I'm going to mark it because we're going to come back to it a couple of different times, obviously. Give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. As best I can tell from those I've read that phrase from, and that didn't make a lot of sense to me, but when reading from those who understand that language better than I, basically the concept is diversify. Hear people say that from an investment standpoint. That you want to be diverse. You want to have not all your eggs in one basket, right? You want to be diversified. Well, I believe what he's challenging us to do here is be diversified in the kind of work and service that we do. Do not pick and choose in terms of a handful or just a small number of things, and here are the only people that I'm going to serve. Here are the only people I'm going to help. Or here's the only kind of things that I'm going to put any energy to. You know how disappointing we might find ourselves, how disappointed we might find ourselves if our mind and our energies and our work and our effort in life is always focused on a single thing. Can you imagine how depressing? Maybe you can know how depressing it is to think that all you know is work. Maybe let me rephrase that. All you know is your job. Better phrase. Can you imagine going through life and the only thing you know is your job? That's not very diversified, is it? You realize how many things in life we miss if we're so singular of mind? You realize how much good that we could produce or experience in our lives if we give a portion to 7 and a portion to 8? That if we give some of our time and our energy and our effort to more than just one single kind of thing? You know, we all may have close nucleus of people. Obviously, family is important. There are requirements that God gives us in relationship to our family, but sometimes we become so focused on so few things that we miss it. Cast your bread upon the waters. Do acts of service and kindness. Do things that God desires for us to do in a diversified way so that you might be able to reap in areas you never thought possible. And you might be able to reap benefit in ways that you never thought you could experience because you actually took the time to branch out and broaden the scope of my service. Notice with me Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, verse 13. Luke 14, verse 13. Jesus speaking, He says, when you give a feast, invite the closest friends you have. Is that what He said? No, that's what we do. Right? That's not what Jesus said. That's what we do. We keep that nucleus as small as possible. But He says, when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind. In their culture, do you know how many times the poor, the lame, the blind would get invited to a feast? Never. Never. They were the outcasts of society, thought upon as not somebody you would want around you during the time of a feast. But He says that's who you should invite. And you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just. You mean to tell me that I'm going to have to wait to see the benefits of my work and labor until I'm raised from the dead? And guess what? Jesus says yes. That there may be certain things that you do, certain acts of kindness that you render, certain acts of service. There may be things that are right and good that you accomplish today that you never see the benefit of until you're raised to walk in that permanent newness of life and that great resurrection day. To the end of the world. That's what He said. That sometimes your acts of kindness will be done, and sometimes they need to be done in a fashion to and for those who have no ability whatsoever to repay that gift, and you knew it when you did it. Diversify. Jesus says, diversify. Don't always invite those same individuals into your life. Don't always invite and allow for the same grouping of people to be involved with you and your life. Diversify. Invite others to come to know you and to gain benefit from the things that you have to offer. Invite others to come and to experience life with you. And yes, even those who others may have cast aside a long time ago. For us to think that we don't have the lame, the blind, the outcast in our society is to be blind ourselves. To think there aren't those that we could be reaching out to would be to be blind ourselves. The Hebrew writer said in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 2. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 2. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing some have unwittingly entertained angels. He didn't say, and we've said this in some Bible studies we've had, He did not say you will entertain angels. What He said was some have. Some have invited unannounced, unknown guests. Somebody has arrived, a stranger has arrived. Some have invited them in. Think about Abraham and Sarah and illustrations like that, who have invited these strangers in, and they have entertained angels unaware. The implication of this is not to try to encourage you to look around and find an angel to bring into lunch today. The idea is you don't know who you may be helping along the path. You don't know what their circumstances in life may be. You don't know what they may be experiencing in the challenges of this life. You may not know whether they're vulnerable or not vulnerable to the message of the gospel in a particular moment. Don't always assume the outcome. Broaden our scope of reach of service. And watch the benefit come, even if it takes to eternity for it to arrive. And especially, I believe we need to reach out more to those who have, in physical senses, nothing to return in its place. Invite them to the feast, even if they cannot invite you to a feast at a later time. Cast your care, or I keep saying care, I don't know why. Cast your bread, I guess because of the word cast, that's why. Cast your bread upon the waters, even when you fear it will be unappreciated. How many things have we not done simply because we've convinced ourselves it won't be appreciated when I do it, so why bother? He did not say cast your bread upon the water when you know that people will respect it and love you for it and appreciate what you've done. The truth be known, many of the greatest sacrifices you and I will ever make in life will probably be things that go unnoticed and unappreciated. And that's just part of it. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it good. It doesn't mean that you and I should be unappreciative when people do things for us and encourage us. But it's just a fact that needs to not discourage us from serving and casting our bread upon the waters. Luke chapter 6, verse 32. Notice again the words of Jesus. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. You've not accomplished any great act by loving those who love you back. Is that enjoyable? Yes. Is it beneficial? Yes. Does it make for great relationships? Sure it does. But what Jesus is trying to illustrate here is you have not done some great act. You've not done some great act of service by having reciprocal relationships. Sometimes the greatest service are non-reciprocal relationships. And what I mean, that's a big word for even me, I understand that. But there's no give and take. Sometimes you just give, and that's all there is. Sometimes there may not be take. Sometimes it's just give. And I need to do that. Verse 32, he says, "And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return." Now, friends, let's admit something here. That's not easy. It is not easy to be giving and lending and helpful and encouraging when you really go into it knowing that it will not be received in the way it should. But Jesus challenges us to even towards our enemies, even those who may mock us for it, challenge us for it, despise us for it. But do it anyway. Because he says, your reward will be great. You will be the sons of the Most High. What's my reward? That somebody repaid what I offered them? That somebody paid back the loan that I extended unto him? That somebody reciprocated in some way? No, he says your reward is you know that you are living as a child of God, as a son of the Most High. Our daily reward in service and doing that which is right is simply the acknowledgement on a daily basis that I'm a child of God. And whether anybody else appreciates what I do and what I offer and the gifts that I extend, whether anybody else ever reciprocates or offers anything in return, I get up every day with the same thought and process in mind. I am strengthened today because I'm a child of God. And I do what I'm doing. I'm serving in the way that I'm serving. And not because I want something in return, but because I'm a child of God. It may rain on your work or the effort may fall in a way unexpected. But serve anyway. Back in Ecclesiastes 11, verse 3, notice that he said, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves. There are times when you're casting your bread upon, times when you're doing acts of kindness and service, and it may rain on it. Because the clouds can only hold so much, and they get so saturated to a certain point that they finally have to empty. And there are going to be moments in life where you're going to think this is great and this is wonderful and this is going to be accomplishing so many things, and here comes the cloud and it has no choice but to empty the rain on it. You ever been in a circumstance where it's raining on you and you could almost seemingly look, it feels like 50 feet away and it's not raining there? The other day I felt like I think it was out, it may have been out on the field, but the sun was shining as bright as it could shine and I was getting drenched. Sun seemingly all around, except where I was standing. Some would say that's karma. I say it happens. It happens. No particular fault of anyone. It just, sometimes your work is going to get rained on. Sometimes your effort and service and acts of kindness and goodness are going to get rained on. Because the clouds just have to empty sometimes. And if a tree falls to the south or the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it lies. You may intended for that tree to fall to the north, but it fell to the south. And once it's fallen to the south, you can't go back and recut it, right? You can't hit the rewind button and hope that you can make it. Sometimes it just happens. And I need to be careful that I don't become discouraged and frustrated, that I begin to let that affect who I am as a person of faith. Because some unknown factor turned my moment into something I didn't expect. Because it just happens that way. He also said in verse 4 of Ecclesiastes chapter 11, he who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. May I simply sum that up by saying this: unsuccessful effort is better than no effort. Failure is better than doing nothing. That's what I believe he's saying there in that text. I believe he's telling us that even if something fails, I would rather see people serving and acting and trying to accomplish something than sit around trying to determine whether it will be successful or not. He said, he who is always observing the season and whether it's going to be good or bad. Anybody read the Farmer's Almanac? Some of you live by it, don't you? Admit it. Admit it. It is your nature's Bible. You live by that. Hoping that that information will give. And you determine you're going to plant in this moment and you're going to do this in this moment. Does it always work? Be honest. No. It doesn't always work. And you in the best laid plans, though there may be some good suggestions and sometimes it works like a charm, other times it doesn't help at all. But imagine if you were always trying to observe the wind. Is it going to rain? Is it not going to rain? How many days of sun are we going to have? If you're constantly trying to observe and wait for what we would call the perfect moment, it's not going to happen. How many moments have we missed while anticipating a problem? How many opportunities have just flown right by in that wind because all we're doing is observing? We're just waiting for that perfect moment. We're waiting for that exact, precise time. God says unsuccessful effort is better than no effort. And we must work even when the environment is not the best. You ever mowed grass in the rain? It ain't fun. But if it's the time you've got to mow the grass, guess what? That grass is getting mowed. That's the way I am anyway. If it's the moment that I've chosen. Now, do I try to find where maybe the dry days are going to be? And do I observe a little? But I don't sit back and never mow the grass, hoping for the perfect moment to mow the grass. Where it's not too hot and not too cold and just dry enough. Nothing gets done. Sometimes you've got to work even when the environments are not the best. Verse 1 of Proverbs 26. The point is different, but I want you to notice the analogy he uses. As snow in summer and rain in harvest, so honor is not fitting for a fool. I want you to see the analogy he uses. He says sometimes things aren't as opportune as you would like them to be. Sometimes there's snow in summer. You ever seen that? I have. We were in the mountains one time. I believe it was in June. And it snowed in the morning and was beautiful by afternoon. Sometimes you see things that are unusual. Is it a bad thing to have rain during the time you're trying to reap the harvest? Yes. But it doesn't mean we don't do anything and we sit back and waiting for the perfect scenario and the perfect environment for things to be able to be accomplished. Too many opportunities are wasted. Too much service doesn't get rendered. Too many things go undone because we're just sitting, waiting. Observing the wind. I can't help but wonder in my mind, how long can you sit and watch the wind anyway? If you were in a treeless place, it'd be kind of futile to try to watch the wind, wouldn't it? With nothing even to observe. And yet many go through life doing nothing but observing the wind. While work could be done without regard to what the end result might be. I think we need to learn, maybe, that to try and to fail is better than not trying at all. And that seems like such a simple little cliche-ish principle. But I believe that's what he's teaching in that moment in Ecclesiastes 11. Verse 5, back to our text. As you do not, don't you notice this? As you, speaking to the person, as you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God who makes everything. What I simply see from that is this basic principle. Let's let God be God in this picture. We want to be both. We want to be the one who does the work and determine the outcome, and He says it doesn't work that way. You don't know certain things. I don't know certain things. Certain variables and factors and moments in life that you and I may not understand. Why are they aligning themselves in this fashion? Why is history unfolding in this purpose? You and I will not be able to determine and to be able to clearly see every moment and why it is what it is. But God can. Back up a couple of chapters into chapter 7, verse 13 of the book of Ecclesiastes. Consider the work of God, for who can make straight what He has made crooked? I like the fact that in some ways the Ecclesiastes writer wrote it in that fashion. Because if we were to use our own minds, we would just say that God makes everything what? Everything straight. In some ways, I think our vision of how this would be written, if we were going to just kind of assume it, would be that once God's made something straight, how could man make it crooked? But that's not what He said, I don't think, is it? He said, how could man straighten out something that God has made crooked? Sometimes, from our visual standpoint, the manner in which God is effective and the manner in which God's working isn't always in a straight line. God is able to use the disjointed path to accomplish the end result that He desires. And so don't give up and throw up our hands and quit and say, I'm never doing anything ever again. Because you just don't know what kind of disjointed path that God may be able to use to accomplish the result. God says, I'm going this way to that end. I may not always go in a direct path. The Israelites are a perfect example of that in our study this morning, remember? He took one of the most indirect paths you could ever imagine to try to get them to the promised land. Notice what Job says. Job 5, verse 9. Job 5, verse 9. Well, add verse 8. But as for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause, who does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. You can't search it out. You can't always see it. You can't always know it. Let's let God be God. Let's let God be who He's supposed to be, so that I'll understand my role. So that when I have questions, why did I not receive what I asked for? How come I didn't get what I was requesting? Why did I receive something I didn't request? I asked for this, and God gave me that. There are going to be moments like that. Why did I lose what I wanted to keep? Why does God even want me saved to begin with? There are all kinds of questions we may have, and that our finite minds may not ever be able to fully comprehend. We may not know why the path went in the direction it did, why the result didn't come in the fashion we hoped it would. We may not always be able to sort out everything. And that's why our cause should be, let God be God. We couldn't straighten it if He decides it's crooked anyway. And if He decided it was straight, we couldn't snap it apart anyway. So my best effort and my best purpose should be to just simply put into the hands of God what belongs to Him. And cast my bread every day upon the waters. And some of it may wash out to sea, further than the eye can see. Some of it may wash back to the shore where I may retrieve it again. Some may end up into the hands of those who unappreciate it. Some may end up in the hands of the starving and the hungry. I don't always know. But I do know that if I do nothing, nothing gets accomplished. I do know that if I do nothing but observe, then I might become one of the most observative people on earth. But what gets accomplished? So instead, I'm going to find the time to work. I'm going to quit waiting on that perfect moment. I'm going to quit waiting thinking that this is going to be a precise, exact moment. Instead, in the morning, I'm going to get up and I'm going to sow seed. In the evening, I'm going to get up and I'm going to sow seed. I will not withhold my hand from it. Each time I'm going to get up, day, night, for I do not know. Put your own name in there. At the end of that verse, he says, for you do not, so throw your personalize it. For Brian does not know which will prosper, either this or that, or whether both will benefit to good. I don't know. So I'm just going to get up in the morning and cast my seed. I'm going to get up in the evening and put my hand to the plow and be busy. And I'm going to quit being a results-driven thinker and try to be a work and service-minded thinker and doer. And I'm going to start casting more bread upon the waters. Notice with me two last passages. Romans chapter 13, verse 11. Verse 10 said, love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. And do this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now our salvation is nearer than we first believed. The moment is here, and we must live in this moment, work and serve and seek out our salvation in this moment. And as Paul wrote to those in Ephesus in Ephesians 5 and verse 16, where he simply said, redeem the time, the days are evil. I'm going to get some bread, and I'm going to start casting it upon the waters. And I'm going to do it day and night, and I'm going to do it in regard to God and not to man-made thinking. I'm going to do it in regard to what God can accomplish through that effort and not by what man thinks or what I think might be the result of it. I'm going to find more waters and I'm going to bake more bread. I'm going to diversify because I just don't know sometimes who may need my help and assistance, who may be able to be encouraged by something I can do. And I'm going to find a way to quit staring at the wind and start serving and start working in honor of God. Because He is the Most High and I am His child. And I want to live that way. If you're subject to the gospel this morning, if we could encourage you, step out on the greatest promises you could ever know. To step out on the promises of God that He made through the shed blood of His only begotten Son. Well, you know remission of sins through baptism today. Well, you know the promises of God if you'll repent and turn from past actions and begin to walk anew in God. Will you confess with the mouth and say, I believe in Jesus. He's Lord. I believe in Him as the Son of God. You've done that at some point, but have put the promises of God behind and it's time to start walking in His path again. If we could help you or strengthen you, pray for you, encourage you in some way to render obedience to the gospel this hour, we'd invite you to come right now while we stand, while we sing.